everyone. Now it's time for us to look on to a specific type of microprocessor as far as our syllabus is concerned. That is, we have to study in detail about 8086 microprocessor. Okay, so actually, when we studied the history of microprocessor, that is how this microprocessor evolved over all these years, we studied about this microprocessor also. That is, when we studied a specific category of microprocessor, that was 16-bit microprocessor, we studied that 8086 was the first invented 16-bit processor. Okay, I'm recalling one thing. We define a microprocessor based on its capacity. That is, n-bit microprocessor can be defined in such a way that how many bits of data he can process, or that particular processor can process at a particular time. Okay, for example, a 16-bit processor means 16 bits of data can be processed by that processor at a particular instance of time. Okay, so naturally, this 8086 is called a 16-bit processor since it can process 16 bits of data at a particular moment or a particular instance of time. Okay, so actually 8086 processor is considered as the first 16-bit processor invented. Okay, and the thing is that the clock speed ranges in three different versions. That means since 8086 processor exists in three different versions. So actually what do you mean by version? The thing is that the processor is the same itself, but with a slight difference in some of its properties or some of its characteristics. Okay, the same processor, the same 8086 processor is existing in three different versions, and the difference actually comes in this clock speed. The first version of 8086 processor is having a clock speed of 4.77 megahertz. The second version of this 8086 processor is having an 8 megahertz clock speed, and the third final version of this 8086 processor is having a 10 megahertz clock speed. So actually, the last classes and all I have already told you, the clock speed, or otherwise called as the clock rate of a specific microprocessor, helps you to decide how many operations can a particular processor execute at a particular moment of time. That means there is an internal clock already available in order to support a processor. Okay, so if you are having a clock which runs very fast, then naturally your processor will be able to execute much more number of operations in a particular moment of time. That means that processor will also be running very fast. Okay, so in turn, if you are having a clock which is running very slowly, then in turn the processor will also run very slowly, or the number of operations that the same processor will be executing will be very less. Okay, so the thing is that the 8086 processor is having three different versions since its clock speed is varying in these three versions. Okay, that means 4.77 megahertz is the first clock speed of the first version of the microprocessor 8086. The second processor, that is the second version of 8086 processor, is having a clock speed of 8 megahertz, and the third version of 8086 processor is having a clock speed of 10 megahertz. Okay, so from this itself it is clear that the version of 8086 processor which runs very fastly, okay, as compared to the rest two versions, is naturally the third version itself, because it is having a clock speed of 10 megahertz. Okay, so since the clock rate is 10 megahertz, naturally the microprocessor corresponding to that particular clock itself will be executing more and more number of operations compared to the other two, okay, in a very shorter span of time. Okay, next thing you have to look is actually I told you that the microprocessors are naturally fabricated with a large number of transistors and some other basic electronic components and all. Okay, so it is actually designed in terms of an IC chip. Okay, so here 8086 processor is actually fabricated with the help of 29,000 transistors. Okay, and not only that, they are able to execute 2.5 million instructions per second. So actually these points, some of the points of what is listed in this particular slide only need to be memorized. The other things are all simply dictated, or otherwise simply specified for your simple awareness. Okay, you just have to know the basic properties of 8086 processors. That's all. Okay, so simply you have to be aware that 8086 processor, that is a processor which you are going to study in detail as far as your syllabus is concerned, is actually able to execute 2.5 million instructions per second. Okay, and the other thing you have to simply be aware is that the instruction set of 8086 is comprising of 22,000 different instructions. Okay, so actually what is the need for instructions for us? We know that the processor is not having a brain or memory or logic concept of its own. Okay, whatever they have to perform, or otherwise whatever we need to them to be performed is actually done with the help of programs. That means we need to write the program correspondingly to make them do something. Okay, if you want to find the factorial of a number with the help of a processor, you have to write the program first of all and then feed to them. Okay, then only as soon as they receive such a program, they will be able to understand what they have to do at each instant of time. Okay, so the thing is that each and every program naturally comprises of a set of instructions. So at each and every application, you will require some sort of instructions for each and every application. So, 8086 processor is having a well enriched instruction set. That means that instruction set is having around 22,000 instructions that can be used for various applications. Okay. Then the thing is that the multiplication and division operations started to be implemented after the invention of this 8086 processor. Till the invention of this 8086 processor, much lesser arithmetic operations were able to be executed. Only after the invention of this 8086 processor, multiplication and division arithmetic operations were easy for the programmer to be executed. Okay. Then the very important thing that I have skipped up, but I want to give you much emphasis so as to be aware of that. That means you have to be completely aware on the points that I'm going to tell you now. Okay, not simply for your awareness, you have to study these points what I'm going to say. Okay, is that 8086 is having a data bus which is 16-bit and the address bus is 20-bit. Okay, 8086 processor is having a 16-bit 16-bit data bus and a 20-bit address bus. Okay, the thing is that each and every processor is having their own data bus, their own specific specification of data bus and their own address bus. Okay, so as far as 8086 processor is concerned, they are also having data bus and address bus, and also there is another category of bus which is called as control bus, and all the bus related information I will tell you later. But the thing is that every processor's address and data bus requires much more emphasis or much more importance to be given. Okay, you have to give much more importance to the data bus and address bus specification of every microprocessor. So as far as 8086 processor is concerned, the data bus capacity is 16-bit and address bus capacity is 20-bit. Okay, so the thing is that the capacity of a particular microprocessor can be well defined with the help of the capacity of its data bus. So I told you 8086 microprocessor is a 16-bit microprocessor. Actually, why we are calling this 8086 processor as a 16-bit microprocessor? Because the data bus which is residing within this 8086 processor is 16-bit. Okay, each and every microprocessor is defined in terms of its capacity. That means, for example, if you are defining a 32-bit microprocessor, okay, why it is called as 32-bit microprocessor? Because the data bus residing within that 32-bit microprocessor is having a data bus which is 32-bit. Okay, so likewise, the 16-bit microprocessor which is 8086 microprocessor is having a data bus of size 16-bit. Okay, and the thing is that the data bus size is 16-bit, which means 16 bits of data can be passed through that particular data bus at a time. Okay, the database capacity of 8086 microprocessor is 16-bit, means 16 bits of data can be passed through that bus at a particular time. Okay, hence a microprocessor is capable of receiving 16 bits of data at a time, and so he can process only 16 bits of data at a time. Hence it is called a 16-bit processor. Once more I will tell you, each and every microprocessor is defined in terms of its capacity. That means you can say a microprocessor is of 8-bit, 16-bit, 32-bit, 64-bit, likewise. How can you define a microprocessor in terms of its capacity? That means how can you say that a particular microprocessor is of this much bit? How can you say that? It is truly based on the data bus capacity, whatever is residing within that specific microprocessor. For example, in the case of 8086 microprocessor, we are saying that 8086 microprocessor is a 16-bit microprocessor. How you are able to say that 8086 processor is a 16-bit microprocessor? The only thing is that the data bus which is residing within this 8086 microprocessor is 16-bit. Okay, through that particular data bus, 16 bits of data can be passed at a time. So, since 16 bit of data can be passed through that data bus, okay, the microprocessor at a particular moment of time will be able to receive only 16 bits of data, okay, at a particular time, and hence it can process only 16 bits of data at a time, and hence it is called a 16-bit processor. Okay, so the database capacity will be helpful for you in order to estimate the capacity of your processor. Okay, the database capacity indicates the overall capacity of your processor or the processing capacity of a particular processor. On the other hand, what is address bus? Address bus is 20-bit in size. That is, we are having another category of bus which is called as address bus. And in case of 8086 processor, we are having an address bus size of 20 bits. That is, since address bus is termed likewise, we are capable of transmitting or passing only address through that particular bus. Okay, so the address bus size is 20-bit means through this bus we are capable of passing only 20 bits of address at a particular time. Okay, so likewise it is designed. So actually what is address bus, what is data bus and all, we'll study when we are going to deal with the bus organization, a bus structure of 8086. Okay. Another one more thing which is related to the topic or related to the point that I have told you now is that since the address bus of 8086 is 20-bit, this 8086 processor will be able to process 1 megabytes of memory. Okay, that means I told you earlier, the database capacity of a processor will be helpful for you to decide the overall processing capacity of a processor. That means how many bits of data a processor can process at a time. Okay. On the other hand, the address bus capacity of a particular processor will be helpful for you to define or decide how many memory or how much memory that particular processor can access. Okay, because address is always related to the memory. Okay, so the address bus of 8086, since it is 20-bit, then 8086 processor can access 2 raised to 20 memory locations, or otherwise which is called as 1 MB of memory. Okay, so the processor 8086 processor can access only 1 megabyte of memory. How you got that value 1 megabyte? Because we know that the 8086 processor is having an address bus of 20 bits. So 2 raised to 20, 2 to the power 20 is equal to 1 megabyte. So 8086 processor is capable of addressing 1 megabytes of memory. Okay, so these are the various features that is bothering 8086 microprocessor. So now we have to look on to the bus organization or otherwise the bus structure of 8086. Okay, so what is actually a bus? A bus is simply a group of conducting wires that carry some sort of information. See, if you're taking a particular electronic device, okay, and if you're trying to see the inner view of that particular electronic device, naturally you will be able to view some of the basic subunits or otherwise some basic components what is actually present within that electronic device. The thing is that what all units or what all components are residing in that particular electronic device will be simply connected to themselves with the help of some wires. Okay, likewise this microprocessor is also having a large number of units, whatever is there within this particular processor. Okay, large number of components or large number of units are there within this microprocessor. Okay, so what all units are there in detail we will be studying when we go to the architecture of 8086. But simply you have to understand one thing, what all units are there within this microprocessor are connected to one another with the help of this bus. So what is bus? It is simply a conducting wire which carries some sort of information. Okay, that is simply it is a wire, okay, which is helpful for us to connect between various subunits or various subcomponents, and also it carries some sort of information, okay, and which is helpful for the normal execution of the processor. Okay, so that is what is bus is termed. all the peripherals are connected to the microprocessor with the help of the buses. That is, all the peripherals, that is what all output input devices are there, they are all connected to the microprocessor with the help of this wires, that is called as bus. So actually, as far as an electronic device is considered, okay, what all subunits are there within that particular electronic device is simply connected with the help of wires that I have told you earlier. But the thing is that almost every components will be connected to one another with the help of same wires